Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, dear Upasakas, Upasikas, and aspiring Bodhisattvas. Thank you for coming back from yesterday's talk. And if you're new to this talk, thank you for coming so that you can turn face to face with Avalokitesvara with us all together. Okay. And so last night we began our introduction of the most commonly chanted chapter from the Lotus Sutra. And we began talking about the particular vow, the wisdom, the compassion, and the virtue of this most popular Buddhist figure around the world, Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva, in Chinese known as Guanyin Pusa and Guanyin Bodhisattva. Okay. And so we had a little fun checking with the audience on whether you know your Universal Gate chapter, which you chant almost every week. And I hope last night's introduction opened up some new views on the text that you have deemed to be familiar. And therefore, I would just like to quickly give a brief recap of what we talked about yesterday for our returners and our newcomers. Okay. And so, first of all, last night we talked about the Universal Gate chapter being one of the most important 4 parts of the Lotus Sutra, the Saddhamma Pundarika Sutra. And that being the fact that the lotus allows us to see that the moment you give rise to a vow, you are immediately accomplished as an aspiring bodhisattva. Just like the seed and the fruit of the lotus will grow and blossom together. It gives us hope for us to see that it doesn't take 3 great asamkhya kalpas to become a Buddha, right? Otherwise it would take forever. So that's why we love the Lotus Sutra so much, because of its all-embracing nature in telling us that any moment you recognize yourself either as a human being, you embody all other 9 realms. You are also a Buddha, a Pratyeka Buddha, a Sravaka, an Asura, a heavenly being, also those in the realms of animals, hell, and hungry ghosts. So together, whenever you join your palms, you will be able to recognize your power to bring the entire universe into one when you join the 10 fingers together. So by joining this all-embracing nature of us and the rest of the universe, we therefore open up the universal gate, that anybody can enter the gate, and anybody, once having entered the gate, has the ability to accomplish him or herself either as a bodhisattva by helping himself attain enlightenment as well as helping others attain enlightenment. Okay. And so the Lotus Sutra in a nutshell gives us the following. We understand that it is a part of the Lotus Sutra, the Universal Gate chapter, and it began with a timely Q&A by the perfect interlocutor, Ujingyi Pusa, right? And in answer to Ujingyi Pusa, Akshayamati Buddha, Bodhisattva, Infinite Intentions question on why is Avalokitesvara called Avalokitesvara, the observer of the world's sounds, the Buddha gave a very wonderful demonstration of Avalokitesvara's Maha Karuna, unconditional loving kindness, and his expedient means to help every type of sentient being in their own way possible. So a perfect demonstration of both wisdom and compassion. And then we didn't have a chance to go into the beautiful repetitive verse at the end as a recap. So we will do that today after my further elaboration of Avalokitesvara's Mahakaruna as well as Upaya Kosaya, which is skillful means. And then finally, it comes down to the most important aspect of our establishment of belief, of faith in this particular practice. So that first of all, we benefit from the compassion and the wisdom of Guanyin. And we will also allow others to benefit from such through our own actions and deeds as practicing Buddhists. Okay. And so we had a quick recap also about Avalokitesvara. Who is he? By the Sanskrit compound word Avalokita Ishvara, right? We realize that this is a Lord, right, who from up high gazes down onto the sounds of the world with perfect ease or mastery. And so he who possesses self-mastery, 自在, watches down on sentient beings from up high and listens to the voices of Christ, then reaches out to us to offer his help in his own unique way. Okay. We see Avalokitesvara in this way. Therefore, in the Chinese translation, we have, first of all, Guanyin to fit this perfect image as described in the Lotus Sutra. And secondly, also a display of his self-mastery, 他的自在, through the core of the Prajna Paramita, which is the perfection of wisdom, translated by Xuanzang into Guan Zizai. So by this we understand that Avalokitesvara, translated into Chinese, has Guan Shiyin, a display of compassion, and then Guan Zizai, a display of wisdom. Okay. So who began all of this discussion? Right? Just like when I walked in, I was given the honor to be introduced by our MC. So Avalokitesvara did not introduce himself into the chapter. Instead, he also has his own interlocutor, 他的当机众。好，什么叫当机众啊？对到正确的机会，好来发言的观众。好 so finding the proper opportunity and the timing. So acting as that interlocutor to speak up on behalf of the audience to ask the Buddha a question. Okay. So this is our wonderful, wonderful first hero in the Universal Gate chapter. Okay. And also, we understand in your handout, I hope you all have one, your handout of the Universal Gate chapter in English will be something which we will use today to help you walk through the chapter. And so it begins with, at that time, 20无尽意菩萨即从坐起偏袒右肩合掌向佛. Okay. So at that time means it's a perfect continuation from chapter 24, with the Universal Gate being chapter 25. So before that, it was a nice discussion about Bodhisattva wondrous voice, Miao Guang菩萨, and his vow to deliver all sentient beings in every way possible through a universal way, anyone, anytime, anywhere. And so having heard of wonderful voices' omnipresence, his infinite manifestations, and his vow to achieve universal salvation, the Universal Gate chapter becomes a sister chapter on universal liberation, which is also what? The amazing Mahayana spirit to ensure that the liberation of all sentient beings comes before one's own liberation. 但愿众生得离苦，不为自己求安乐. So this wonderful selflessness allows us to see how bodhisattvas reverse their progress on Buddhahood and even delay their own attainment in order to make sure that the rest of us will also arrive on the far shore. Okay, so it's like the pilot of a plane, right? He will see no point in flying an empty plane over to the other shore. The best accomplishment for a pilot is to make sure that his plane is full of other sentient beings who are aimed for the same goal. And so bodhisattvas too are the same to achieve universal liberation. And so at that time, it means conditions are now right for sentient beings to hear about Avalokitesvara. Okay? And the fun thing about the opening, okay, again, I would like to reiterate this for today's newcomers. The opening paragraph of the Universal Gate is extremely important because it symbolizes how exactly do Mahayana practitioners reach the far shore. Okay. And so it says, first of all, Akshayamati rose from his seat, 即从坐起, bared his right shoulder, 偏袒右肩, put his palms together, 合掌向佛, facing the Buddha, 而白佛言. And just these few actions is enough for us to see how we can also act like bodhisattvas to help others. And so by rising from his seat, it means the bodhisattva now returning from the realm of prajna paramita, which is the emptiness of all emptiness. Okay, so remember in the Heart Sutra when it says, when Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva was coursing in the deep prajna, right? When he was in that full state of perfect enlightenment, he saw three things. First of all, he saw that the 5 skandhas were empty. And so by the 5 skandhas being empty, it means we as sentient beings or humans have a self that is actually empty. This is not really Miao Guang sitting in front of you. If I'm thinking about my lifetime in Australia when I was still a lay person, right? And this is me sitting in front of you if I'm looking at myself as of now. But if I look at myself from the future perspective, at the same time, I won't be me. And so that emptiness of the self is the first step to help us overcome ills and suffering. And the second type of emptiness which the Bodhisattva saw is in the Heart Sutra, where it says there is no suffering, no end of suffering until no path or the end of suffering, no cause, right? And so by that, you start to see the Dharma. By Dharma with a small d, we refer to all phenomena in the world. So not only do the phenomena of the self should be empty for ourselves, when we look at the world around us, as you sit in the shrine today, the crowd here will only exist for now, right? It's a phenomenon. But once after the talk, when you disperse, we will no longer be that same crowd. And if we hold on to the permanence of any feeling that you deem to be happy or full of suffering, then that becomes the cause of dukkha. Okay, so Bodhisattva Avalokitesvara on the second level realizes that not only is the self empty, but dharmas are also empty. So going from until there is no ignorance till no end of ignorance, 无明亦无明尽. That means he also realizes the emptiness of the 12 links of dependent origination, which becomes the cause of us becoming reborn in the world once again and then again. Okay? We tend not to see any of these because we take so much of it as our own experience. And so remember, either not seeing the self as empty or not seeing the world's phenomena as empty, we're going to feel pain. We're going to stop enjoying these provisional pleasures. Okay? Once there was a woman who was about to go on a holiday and to fly away. And so after she checked herself in, she found herself in a very crowded lounge. Okay? She had a few hours before boarding time, and so she found herself a spot at a table, sharing the table with another man. And so she sat down. She told herself, okay, I have a few hours before I enjoy my holidays. I'm going to do some reading, and I'm going to enjoy my favorite chocolate chunk chip cookie, right? The crispy, the juicy, the sweetness of the chocolate that breaks off from the crumbs of the cookie is going to give me my initial pleasure to going on holidays. So she sat down at the table, opened up a few pages, read the pages, and then she reached out to the bag of cookies in front of her to take one. Okay. Then funny thing happened. The man sitting in front of her looked up, smiled at her, and without saying a word, also reached out for a chocolate chip cookie without asking for permission. Okay. This is quite weird, isn't it? So she started to feel uncomfortable. Why is the man so rude? Right? At least you would have the courtesy to ask me, I have the heart to share. Okay? But it's okay, I'm generous enough to share one cookie of my bag with you, so I'm going to let it go. Okay? So she went back to her book, read a few more pages, and then she reached out for a second chocolate chip cookie. Okay? Funny thing happened again. The man smiled, again without saying a word, also helped himself to another chocolate chip cookie. Okay. So by then, she was no longer able to enjoy that crispy, sweet, and tender taste of the chocolate breaking off the crumbs. Because by that time, all that filled her mind was one question. Why is this rude man eating out of my bag of chocolate cookies? Right? The sweetness wasn't there, the content of the book wasn't there. Okay? But she tried to compose herself and say, I'm going to stay calm. I'm not going to let this rude man ruin my holiday. So she asked herself to go back to the book, read a few more pages, and then reached out for a third chocolate cookie. And then the man also did the same. Right? It's like a mirror. So whenever she reached out for a chocolate cookie, the rude man also smiled and helped him with one. Until the moment she was about to explode, and then there was one more cookie left in the bag. So she turned to the man, looked at him with a forceful smile, thinking, I'm going to see if you have the courtesy to let me have my last chocolate chip cookie. Right? And so the man also smiled back, reached out for that last piece, broke it in half, shared one half with her. Okay. So she could not taste anything of that half a chocolate of cookie and quickly just packed up and got ready to board. Okay. So when she finally sat down on the plane, she started to complain in her mind, why am I so unlucky today? Right? This is such a bad way for me to open my holidays. Rude man, terrible experience, right? But it's okay, I'm about to take off to the Bahamas, right? I'm going to enjoy the beautiful sunshine and the crystal clear ocean. So I'm going to go back to my book and to enjoy my holiday from this point on, living the present moment, okay? However, when she looked down to take out her book from her bag, what she saw lying under her book was a whole bag of unopened chocolate cookies. So all along, she has been eating out of a stranger's bag who was very kind and pleasant to smile all the way and share the cookie with her. Right? And so the moral of the story is that when we mention the word greed or anger, right, it all becomes the self that causes all of these perceptions. And so when we chant in the Heart Sutra that not only the Four Noble Truths, the 12 nidanas, and even the 5 skandhas are empty, it actually is teaching us to go beyond the self, right? To overcome all ills and suffering, the first step will be to go beyond our self-perception and self-attachment. Okay? And so by doing that, we will see going finally into the third level of emptiness, Guanyin Bodhisattva sitting there with this very beautiful posture, right? The reclining posture says, oh, not only do I realize the self and the worldly dharmas are empty, I also realize even the concept of the dharma itself is empty. So if we cling on to the concept of emptiness, right, you're going to walk around and say, hey, you should remain empty, don't get angry, right? It's actually an attachment to the concept of emptiness itself. 我执, 法执, 空执, right? And so we will see when Akshayamati Bodhisattva, who has attained that level of attainment, rises from the seat, right? What he does, he's rising from the seat of emptiness. To go back from the Buddha's attainment and coming down to the level of the sentient beings, being face to face with all of us and say, okay, I'm going to talk to you about enlightenment in your language, right? Not in my language, not in the Buddha's language, which is silence and smile, right? If only Dharma were that easy to learn, we only need to smile at each other and remain silent, right? This would be a very easy Dharma talk, yeah. But nothing will ever go my way. I have to keep talking and you have to keep listening. So I thank you for doing that. So rising from that emptiness. And then what happens is when he bares his right shoulder, right? And with a covered left shoulder, we will see it's also a balance between the provisional truth and the ultimate truth. What's exposed is presented in the form of concepts, right? As we talk about what is Dharma, right? If you go to a Chan master and say, what is enlightenment, right? A Chan master would say, go and eat, go and pee, go and sleep. That's enlightenment, Right? He would have to tell you in your own level. But if you were to turn to a Buddha and say, what is enlightenment? He would say, you will realize once you enter deep meditative concentration. Okay? And so by that, we're already seeing the Bodhisattva coming down to sentient beings level and then displaying a good balance of the two types of truth that we can learn, the ultimate and the provisional. And thirdly, after the display of his wisdom, joining his palms to display that all 10 realms are one, to show that, yes, a Mahayana Bodhisattva has the compassion to regard all sentient beings as equals. Right? You're like my parents, you're like my sister, you're like my brother. I will treat you as if you were my own. And so by this, why was it Akshayamati who raised the question? We would see that him having inherited the spirit of universal liberation from Samantabhadra, Puxian Pusa, right? He has realized that there are infinite beings out there, 众生无边, right? And there are infinite karma which these beings are creating, okay? 业障无尽. And even by that, he still makes the vow to liberate all. So only at his level is he ready to bring out the character of Guanyin Bodhisattva. And so in reply to Akshayamati, we will see in the second paragraph, which presents the core of the Universal Gate chapter, it says, good men, if there be countless hundreds of millions of billions of living beings experiencing all manner of suffering, right? This is the way you learn and practice Guanyin's way. First of all, if you hear of Avalokitesvara, and second of all, you call his name single-mindedly, thirdly, you will be liberated. Okay, so bear in mind these 3 lines. These will be the keys to how we understand Guanyin Bodhisattva, and this will be the key to how we also become Guanyin Bodhisattva in order to attain liberation. Okay? And so we begin to go into the third paragraph. Now the Buddha starts to talk about if anyone who upholds the name of Avalokitesvara to fall into great fire, right, to be washed away by water, to be swept by the wind. So in these parts, the 7 calamities, including the 3 poisons, are the question on how does Avalokitesvara come to this world to help us. He does so in 2 ways. First of all, he does it in one way that we cannot feel or see. So we will see the first part of the Buddha's answer as Avalokitesvara in spirit, okay, 名义. And by in spirit, it means we may not necessarily see Guanyin in the form of the white robe, right? Or in that posture when we ask for his help. But nevertheless, Avalokitesvara is everywhere with us. Okay, so a recap from yesterday, we had these 7 calamities, right? He says, anytime you are burned by fire, chant his name, the fire will go out. Anytime you are washed away by water, chant his name, you will be swept ashore. Anytime you are blown away by the wind, right, you will feel freshened up again by the knives, clubs, the yaksha and the raksha. And so technically, these aren't just the physical sceneries that you sing in the Buddha Sutras. Remember, we are not to take the sutra too literally. We have to take it by spirit. That's what we mean by Avalokitesvara in spirit, not in phenomenon. And so fire, when you're actually engulfed by fire, it represents the fire of anger. So ladies and gentlemen, dear aspiring bodhisattvas, whenever you feel that you're burning up with your fire of anger, be mindful of Avalokitesvara, right? And then you will find a moment of coolness and peace. Or whenever you are washed away by the water of greed, desire, or clinging, you're drowning in your attachments, think of Guanyin Bodhisattva, and his wisdom will help you be away from the water that's drowning you. And the wind of ignorance, certainly that blinds us from seeing reality as it is, instead of seeing reality as it should be, right? That self and the chocolate cookies that had no fault on its own became unenjoyable and tasteless. Okay, so seeing that clearly, that means Avalokitesvara awakens your mind and calms down the wind of ignorance. And also knives and clubs in the form of arrogance and jealousy. Right? We hurt others with our attitude, wanting to be better than others, can't stand the fact that others are better than us. Right? And thinking of Guanyin Bodhisattva's equality, thinking you are me and I'm you, I can rejoice in your attainment. Right? The clubs and the knives will shatter. And the yakshas and the rakshas will be the temptations of worldly fame and desire, as well as the shackles that gives you certain expectations about the world. And finally, the thieves, the brigands, that steal the peace of your mind by causing endless affliction. Okay? So that's as far as we came to. So in conclusion, we realize that when we talk about the qi nan, or the 7 calamities, right, it's all external calamities that arise as a result of our mind not being able to see clearly. And so chanting to Guanyin, the Bodhisattva says, yes, indeed, are the awe-inspiring spiritual powers, that loftiness of the great Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva, the Mahesvara. Okay? And so that's as far as we went last night. I'm going to go now into the 3 poisons, which follows the 7 calamities. So if you would kindly turn to page 2 of your handout. Okay? This is where we will continue. That is the 4th paragraph, right? We having covered the 7 calamities, right? And then Buddha goes on to Akshayamati and says, if any living beings are much given to greed, let them keep in mind and revere Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva, and they will be freed from their greed. Okay? So similar to the calamity of water that represents our clinging, the greed in this case actually refers particularly to our attachment to sensual desires. 色欲. Right? It's an unavoidable desire as human beings, but we realize that anytime we indulge ourselves in such sensual pleasure, we lose our senses, we lose our ability of judgment, and we lose our own credibility. Sometimes we even lose the harmony in our families. Okay? So it's so important in the Universal Gate chapter. It says, when you discover that you are indulging heavily in sensual desires, one way to overcome it is to keep chanting Guanyin Bodhisattva's name. Okay? And so by this, what we mean by indulgence in sensual desire is that if you engage in improper sexual conduct in proper times, in proper place, and with improper people, or in proper frequency, that means you are actually giving rise to your greed of sensual desires. And so what happens when you chant Avalokitesvara, right? Avalokitesvara will tell us that one way to remedy our greed is by the practice of fellowship, 同事. And by 同事, it actually means, are you able to regard these people as your own family? Right? You would never hurt your family. You would never trespass against your family. And you always think on the better behalf of your families. And so, by regarding every elder man as your own father, every elder woman as your own mother, and every younger man or women as your brothers and sisters, and your daughters and sons, then you give rise to Avalokitesvara's wisdom of fellowship, to see that you are a part of my own, and I shall never hurt you. And so by this, the Buddha says, if you're much given to greed, right, keep in mind and revere Avalokitesvara. And second, he says, if any are much given to anger, keep in mind and revere Avalokitesvara. Right? So what is that anger? Yesterday we've talked about the cause of anger being that self, right? The attachment to my perceptives of the fact that I want this, I should have that, I expect everything to happen. Just like the mother and her daughter with 2 apples. Right? You have taken that perception on the daughter to be greedy, and that's why you become angry. While the daughter was merely tasting both apples to make sure that the mother gets the sweeter one. Okay? So the girl being the selfless self, compared to the mother's preconceived self, becomes an amazing cause. And so what happens is, by Guanyin Bodhisattva's perception of the 5 skandhas being empty, right? When you see form, you know that the vision of the form actually gives you a perception, right? I see a cup of brown water, right? If you're really tired, what would that cup of brown water be to you? Coffee, right? So if you're tired now, think of coffee. You won't fall asleep during Venerable Miao Guang's Dharma talk, right? You can already imagine the aroma, right? So that's what we mean by perception. But what if I was to say, if you're sleepy now, that brown water becomes Chinese herbal medicine? 好，累了，来一杯中药吧, right? No one's ever going to like that. And so by coffee, right, what happens is your volition, which is your intention, says, oh, I want a cup of coffee. Right? But if it was actually herbal medicine, you would say, no, keep it away from me. Right? It's bitter, it's undelicious. And then what happens is, in your mental formation, your action, right, intention leading to action, it will affect how you act based on your perception of that cup of brown water. And then finally, your experience of this whole process becomes stored in your consciousness. So next time, when you see a similar form, it triggers your memory, and you'll remember the last time you tasted this brown water, it used to be coffee. Okay? But now I could tell you it's actually Coke, right? For the youngsters, even better, right? And so remember, when you're laughing as you hear of the word Coke, it seems like you can already taste that cool, sweet, refreshing sense, right? But what happens is you're not really drinking Coke right now. Where is your Coke? Is your Coke real? Well, it's real to you because you remember how it tasted. It tasted sparkling, it tasted sweet, it tasted cold, right? And so that's how you remember. But in reality, you have to see that when Guanyin Bodhisattva says the self and its objects are really not there, that is to stop you from reacting too quickly based on your sensations, right? Give yourself a few more moments to observe and to understand what is actually in front of you. And so to remedy hatred, Guanyin Bodhisattva's name, when you chant it, it will give rise to the wisdom of equality, to think, yes, basically the self and its object are equally empty, right? So there's no need to cling on to either. Therefore, you will allow that anger to cease. So this is the second poison. And the third poison says, if anyone are much given to ignorance, keep in mind and revere Avalokitesvara, right? They will be freed from their ignorance. Okay? And therefore, by ignorance in this case, again, it's our confusion with what the self is perceiving. Okay? What exactly am I looking at right now? How real is it? And how far away am I from reality as it is? Right? Confusion means you're seeing reality as it should be. Right? Brown water should be coffee, but reality as it is, it's Chinese herbal medicine, and so on. Okay? And so most of the time, this confusion of perception is the basic cause of ignorance that causes dukkha in all of us, because we fail to see life and death as it is. Okay? Once there was a very rich man who had 4 wives, okay? But he was getting very old. And so upon his deathbed, he told himself that I don't want to go and die alone. So maybe I should ask one of my wives to go with me, right? And she first turned to his 4th wife, who was most young and beautiful, and says, I have treated you well, right? I have looked after you and bought you jewels and diamonds to adorn you. So since I'm so good to you, will you go into the afterlife with me? Will you die with me, right? And immediately the 4th wife refused and said, no, I'm not going to die with you. You're going to die alone and I will not come. And so he turned to his his 3rd wife, going from the 4th, thinking, well, if my youngest won't go with me, my 3rd wife is someone who I've also treated well. I've made sure that all my possessions are in her possession. She owns everything that I have. So he turns to his 3rd wife and asks, I have bought you everything. I have named you as the rightful owner of all of my properties. When I die, will you go with me? The 3rd wife turned to his man and says, no, I am not going to die with you. I'm still useful. I'm still very, very smart and agile. And so please have some compassion in me. When you die, I am going to remarry. That's the end of the story. Okay? And so he turns to his second wife and says, although I haven't bought you diamonds and jewelries, I have always acknowledged your presence and remembered you. So would you go into the afterlife with me? Okay? But quietly, the second wife turns to him and says, I'm so sorry I can't go with you because I have so many things to take care of. But I promise you one thing. When you die, I will personally take your body to the crematorium and to send you off. Right? And so he is left with only one of his oldest wife whom he has neglected for long. He seldom talks to his oldest wife. He seldom bought him anything. But he still doesn't want to die alone. So he gathered all the courage to ask his first wife, I am sorry that I have neglected you. I have forgotten about you. But I'm going to die, so would you come with me? Okay. And then without a second thought, the oldest wife says, of course I will come with you. We are husband and wife. I will go anywhere you go. Okay. So the moral of the story is that every one of us in this room each has our own 4 wives. Okay. The 4th wife represents our youth and body. When we die, we can never take this body with us. It would not follow us. And the 3rd wife represents our possessions. Right? When we die, these possessions will not be buried with us. They will find their own owners. They will each play to their new purposes. And the 2nd wife represents our friends and family. Although we once in a while will connect with our friends and family, but upon the moment we die, the best they can do is to come to our funerals, shed a few tears and say goodbye, and then go back to their own lives. Okay. So what about the first wife? What does it represent? The first wife represents our own mind. Right? This is the mind we seldom talk to. We seldom sense their existence, and we hardly ever look after it. But the mind is the only thing that will follow us when we go into our next life, because it contains everything that we have done, the karma, right? And the deeds, the seeds that follow us. So to be able to see through life and death clearly, we hope that the story of the 4 wives will give us a good message. That is, enjoy your youth, look after your body while you can, right? Have fun with your possessions, but allow them to play to their value when they find a new owner. And stay connected with our friends and families because they are the ones who will care for us. But most importantly, look after your mind. Right? Spend some time alone with your mind, either to read, to meditate, to talk to yourself in silence, but to look after it. Okay? And therefore, the story of the 4 wives will show that we are required to find a new perspective to how we look at life. What's our most treasured possession is usually what we fail to see, but they will follow us immediately. And so, hopefully through the story, we'll be able to find some wisdom to clear up the confusions caused by our false perceptions and to see reality as it is, not reality as it should be. Okay. And so we'll see that just with the 7 calamities and the 3 poisons, right? The 7 calamities are not the worst disasters in our life. Right? When your house catches on fire, you can keep finding a new life. When there's flood, we eventually get back on our feet. These are the external calamities. But the hardest ones to deal with are the internal calamities that manifest in the form of the 3 poisons: greed, hatred, and ignorance. And so what happens is, when the Buddha mentions the 7 calamities and the 3 poisons, he ends with this very important line. What does it say? If you look at page 2, right? Second last paragraph. It says, Akshayamati, Avalokitesvara possesses such awe-inspiring spiritual powers, and many have benefited from them. This is why living beings should constantly keep him in mind. 无尽意，观世音菩萨有如是等大威神力，多所饶益。是故众生常应心念。So for this reason, we should always keep Avalokitesvara in mind. So when we feel the presence of these poisons and the calamities, we find the guidance provided by Avalokitesvara, either in the form of compassion or wisdom, to navigate ourselves through these troubles and regain our insight or enlightenment. Okay? And now let's go into the next part, which are what we mean by the 4 implorations. And so in these 4 implorations, you will see the 2 kinds of wishes, right? 求男得男，求女得女. So Avalokitesvara is quite well known in the Chinese culture for anyone wishing to bear a handsome son or a beautiful daughter, right? A graceful, elegant, smart daughter. And then Avalokitesvara will be able to oblige your wishes. And so on the surface, again, by the metaphor of a son blessed with merit and wisdom, right, it's quite often for us to hope for that our son will look handsome, right? And usually the daughter's appearance comes next. But what parents usually wish for is what? 三从四德, 端庄贤淑, right? What we care for is whether if this daughter actually shows personal virtue. Okay? So on the surface, we're looking at the gender of your baby. But in another way, when we uphold Avalokitesvara's mind, you will see that you are also nurturing the future conditions for your body and mind. So that's why we call this a personal development through the 2 implorations when people chant to Avalokitesvara for a good son and a good daughter. So mind you, when you do that, you're actually wishing for a better future. Okay? And so in this case, we will see when you come to page 3, right? So it says, remember, right? You chant to Guanyin Bodhisattva and he will give you a son blessed with merit and wisdom. You chant to Guanyin for a daughter, he will give you a daughter who is what? Blessed with well-formed and attractive futures, right? Beautiful daughter, one has planted the root of virtue over lifetimes, 树植德本, and is cherished and respected by all, 众人爱敬, right? The kind of daughter you wish for. So Akshayamati, such are the power of Avalokitesvara. And it says, if any living being reveres and worships Avalokitesvara, your merit will not be in vain. So finally, closing up with this section on how Avalokitesvara appears in spirit through the 7 calamities, the 3 poisons, or the 2 implorations. What Buddha wants you to believe is that if you believe in Guanyin Bodhisattva will come to your aid. And if you believe and uphold his name and pray to him, no merit resulting from doing so will be in vain. Okay? And so we have a lot of interesting stories to share about when mothers are bearing their children, right? The effects of chanting Avalokitesvara or imagining the face of Avalokitesvara actually has an effect on the baby. Okay? So I came across a friend of mine in the YAD, the youth division, when I was also a YAD member myself. Right? She told me that when she became pregnant, what she did every day is she wished for that in the future her child would be blessed with good fortune and that he will be blessed with wisdom and that he will be loved by all. So she chanted Pumenping at least 21 times every day. And then she chanted Dizangjing, the Siddhigarbha Sutra, at least once every day, all in one day. Right? And all in that process, she wanted her child to look like Guanyin Bodhisattva, 庄严, 美丽, handsome. So what she did was she began to paint and draw Guanyin Bodhisattva's name and image. And the funny thing was, she realized that all the time when she was pregnant, she had never gotten angry. She was always peaceful and happy in the process of chanting and visualizing the face of Avalokitesvara. Okay? And so when the baby was born, we were utterly in awe because the baby looked exactly like the painting she had been sketching. Okay? So you look at this baby, Jerry, right, who grew up in Vancouver. And on the left, it's the Guanyin image, which the mother has been sketching over and over and over every day, right? So we would say by upholding 持念观世音菩萨, right? It's not just to chant his name or to visualize his image, but the most important thing is that if you believe in the virtue and the compassion of Guanyin, look at the baby. He looks exactly like Guanyin, doesn't he? And this baby is very, very well-tempered, and he has remained a vegetarian on his own choice, and he's extremely adorable, loved by everyone, right? You see that moment of peace and joy, and only good things has happened to the family ever since. My friend's mother, who was diagnosed with cancer, recovered after 3 rounds of chemotherapy. And she believed that all along it's Jerry, the baby, who has given her the strength. And so the power of faith therefore arises in the fact that when you believe in the good things, right, you will bathe in the positive energies of the good things. So Jerry is now almost 7, looking very beautiful, and he enjoys visiting the temples. But secondly, every day he would actually, before he goes to bed, he will ask, is grandma okay? Is grandpa good? I hope you do well before he goes to bed. Okay, so 树值得本, right? You carry forth your past merits and fortunes. 众人爱敬. How can you not love this boy? He's so adorable, right? And he is very kind and compassionate. And so by this, I think it's a very nice example for us to see whenever you are in need of power or strength, right? Be mindful of Guanyin Bodhisattva in that way. Think of his compassion, right? Think of his elegance, and think of his wisdom that will allow us to overcome all calamities. So no merits will go in vain if you practice accordingly. Okay, so in the first part of what we call the intangible ways, right, we begin with the external delusions that being mindful of Guanyin will help us overcome, and the internal delusions, which are the 3 poisons, right, where Guanyin will help us navigate our way through. And finally, the 2 wishes allows us on personal and interpersonal levels to build a better future life. Right? So if you feel that you're not beautiful enough, I think following the wisdom and the compassion of Guanyin, you'll find a way to refine yourself. Right? You change your composure, you change your heart, you show your kindness, and then you will be perceived in a very different way, mentally and physically. And it ends with that exhortation. So remember, if you uphold his name, none of your merits will go to waste. That means after this 7, 3, and 2 sets, we're looking at an exhortation for belief in and practice of Guanyin's way. Okay? So this is how we actually see Guanyin in an intangible way. So Guanyin in spirit. Okay? Now, I'm going into the next part, which is Guanyin in action. Okay? And so far we are coming along to talk about the virtue, right, and the merit of believing in, praying to, and following Guanyin. But now, the second part, when Buddha goes on to the next section, it's about how we can see Guanyin in action. And so if you look at page number 3, okay, and then we go to the third last paragraph on page 3, where it says, Akshayamati Bodhisattva said to the Buddha, "World-honored one, how did Avalokitesvara come to this Saha world?" Okay? And most importantly, he asks another question. How does he carry out his expedient means? So we are now looking at a description of Guanyin in action, in verbal, in mental, and in physical action. Okay? And so, by verbal, physical, and mental action, right, Akshayamati opens by saying, how exactly does Guanyin appear in this world? Okay? 观世音菩萨是怎么现身的 in this Saha world for the sentient beings, right? By Saha, it actually means what? Endurance. So we are all beings of the Saha world who are born into this endless series of the need to endure and to be patient, right? 堪忍的众生. And so by appearing in the Saha world, what Avalokitesvara wishes to do is to help us liberate ourselves from the condition of the Saha. Okay? And since that's his purpose, the next question is about how Avalokitesvara applied the power of skillful means, right? Two questions. How does he come? How does he apply the power? And so just in a quick nutshell, by skillful means, we see the Sanskrit upaya kausalya. In Chinese, 善巧方便. Or in the correct order, 方便善巧. Okay. This is what we talk about every day, right? 给我一个方便, right? But what do we mean by 方便? Right? Is it an unconditional obliging of sentient beings? Okay. If it's that, it's only upaya. But hopefully Avalokitesvara shows us what upaya kausalya is in full. So we can understand 方便 in three ways. First of all, if we break it in two, you will see upaya means your way or method, right? And kausalya actually means what? Your way to apply that method. Okay. So in other words, your first level of 方便 is to help sentient beings in a way that is suitable to them. 我用适合你的方式来帮助你. Okay. So my teacher, Venerable Master Hsing always applies the method in the proper way. For example, he always makes sure that he understands how we feel. Okay. So on a personal level, I used to work in his secretariat office. And every day will be summoned in to report to him. Okay, that wasn't easy. I was so nervous. I did not look forward to seeing my master every day when I was young, right? Because I had to be very careful with what I had to report. And if I didn't do it the right way, I would feel very terrible. Okay, so you might imagine, it's a love-hate situation, right? Wow, I'm going to see my master. Well, I wish I didn't have to. Okay? But I realized that he applies his upaya kausalya in a very nice way. First of all, he understands how we feel. He could feel my nervousness. So every time I walk into his founder's office, the first thing he said to me wouldn't be, okay, report to me now, start talking. Instead, he would say, come sit, have a cup of tea. 坐, 喝茶, 或是吃饭. Or have you eaten? If you haven't eaten, come and eat. He says that not only to me every day, he says that to anyone, anywhere, anytime who comes near him. So to us, I feel that this is his upaya to give us comfort, right? To make sure that he established a good connection before we got into business. Okay, so maybe the after part wasn't so beautiful, but I really appreciated his way of upaya to help us ease into a situation. So again, upaya and kausalya, to apply the right method in the right way. Okay, this is what we do when we reach out to help people. And the second way is to combine both, upaya, kausalya. And if you do it well, you discover that it becomes a very beautiful gateway. Okay, what do we mean by gateway? 法门. Okay, the word 法门 in Buddhism is not really that architectural structure that you see, you walk through. Right? 法门 actually means some kind of teaching. It's a teaching that shows you the way. And if you're able to pass through that gateway, then that gateway becomes a portal to transformation. So passing through the right way will allow you to change largely. And so by this it means that you are actually guiding sentient beings through the gate of Buddhahood in either your way or his way. So you're applying both perspectives. So using the proper way to make sure that it actually works on the proper person. Okay. If you have been to Foguang Shan, you will realize the first shrine in Foguang Shan is what? Not the main shrine, it's actually the Great Mercy Shrine. Okay. And the Great Mercy Shrine has been sitting atop our Buddhist college for more than 50 years, guarding every aspiring Dharma teacher in their practices and in their learning. Okay? But it isn't always a place of peace because it's half open to public. So every once in a while, it will be disturbed by unwelcomed presence. So what we mean by that is, since it's such a spiritual place, sometimes people with special sensory functions, right, become extraordinary. And they will come into the shrine not as themselves. Okay, so one night, when the Buddhist college actually sounded the board for great silence, which happens at 9:45, that means everybody should go to bed. We heard this man coming through the Great Mercy Shrine, yelling and calling. He was saying, what was he saying? He says, on the creed of the deity of heaven, I'm here to save you all, so open the door for me. Right? That was in the middle of the night, so everyone was quite confused. Right? So a couple of the teachers got up there. We saw this old man who was not of a sane mind. He's screaming and yelling and says, open the door, I want to see Guanyin so I can pass the heavenly deity's seal to him. Right? And so some of the teachers tried to talk some sense out of him and says, look, you're not being normal, right? Stop talking, and this is where everybody needs to rest, so stop disturbing everybody. Right? And so by that, they were trying to talk and reason. And to him, it was like, stop, don't disturb me, right? Don't stop me, I have to go into the shrine to see Guanyin. So they weren't able to stop the chaos. If the teachers weren't able to do it, they had to turn to the Chancellor, 院长. Right? 院长这个精神状态不太好的人没有办法帮助他. What should I do? Right? So Venerable Hui, who was the Chancellor then, heard of the story and says, okay, let me talk to the man. Let me talk to the man who needs to pass the heavenly seal to Guanyin Bodhisattva. Right? And so she walked up there, and she did not try to stop him in anything. Instead, she asked her question, what are you doing here? Right? And so he says, oh, I have a secret seal which I must pass to Guanyin in person. Right? Otherwise, the deity will not let me go. So let me through. Okay? So Venerable Hui decided that this must be a man not of a sane mind. But she decided to ask another question. And so she goes, where is that seal now? And the man clutched his hands and goes, no, I cannot show you. Right? I'm the only rightful owner of the heavenly seal. You can't see it because you're not Guanyin. Okay? And so Venerable Hui thought to herself, we have to use the proper way to guide him. He has an objective to fulfill. Right? So she turned to him and goes, okay, so if you must pass the seal to Guanyin, let me tell you, Guanyin is not inside the shrine right now. Okay? So the man listened and goes, oh, really? Tell me where Guanyin is. Okay? So Venerable Hui closed in, said in a very harsh voice, okay, Guanyin wants me to tell you that he is outside the mountain gate. So go quick. Right? She says, Guanyin is outside the mountain gate. 观世音菩萨在山外等你，赶快去. So the man goes, okay, I will go now. Right? So he rushed and dashed outside the shrine and returned peace to the Great Mercy Shrine. Yeah. When we heard of the story, right, I was quite in awe. Because in the first part, I wasn't sure why Venerable Hui was playing along with this mentally disabled man. But she fully applied Upaya Kosaya. Right? She knew what the man wanted and gave the man what he wanted. Right? And so this is the second type, right? Not only in your own way, you have to understand whether this way actually fits that person. Okay, that's the second way. And the third way is when Upaya becomes a secret and Kosaya becomes a wondrous method. And so by secret, it means there will be moments when you cannot guess what the other person is thinking. Right? So if you don't know what the other person is thinking, don't bother guessing. Okay? But with a certain amount of wisdom and experience, right, you will find your way to guide the person through. Okay? So this is what we mean by to guide them through the gate of Buddhahood in your own way. Upaya, the secret wonder. Okay? Something that we don't understand. Okay? We once had a young bhikksu in Shan who was very unhappy. He was so unhappy that he wanted to commit suicide. Okay? So when Venerable Master Xing saw him, he asked him, what is wrong with you? And then the young bhikksu says, I am very unhappy, I want to die. Okay? Why do you want to die? I'm full of anger, I just can't let it out. And it's making me very unpeaceful. Right? So I don't want to live anymore. And so Venerable Master says, now I want you to do one thing. If you do it for me, you can go and die. Okay? What you need to do first is come, 帮我捶背, right? Rub my shoulders for me. This is not helping me, Master. How can rubbing your shoulder help me overcome my will to commit suicide? He goes, don't worry, just give it a try. Okay. So he started to rub Venerable Master's shoulder with his fist. And all along, Venerable Master goes, harder, 捶用力一点. Right? So at first, he didn't dare punch harder. But as Venerable Master insisted, 用力一点, 用力一点, 不要怕. Don't be afraid, just punch me very hard. The boy started to punch harder and harder and harder, right? Until he started to cry and scream, right? He cried and screamed and punch for a few minutes. And then when he stopped, right, Venerable Master turns to him and goes, there, you have let out all of your anger. I have them all. So walk away without any of this. I will keep them with me. 你的所有的愤怒跟烦恼呢，都给我了，不要再去想它，往前看。Okay. Then the boy walked away with a smile. Okay. We may not understand what actually happened, but somehow the boy got the Venerable Master's intention. And what we are seeing, I think, is exactly Avalokitesvara's Upaya Kosaya, to help sentient beings, right? I don't even need to know your pain. I just need to know that you are in pain. Okay. So Guanyin Bodhisattva is about to manifest in the Universal Gate chapter in this way, right? Through the Upaic ways. And so the question goes on to this, right? World-honored one, how did Avalokitesvara come to the Saha world? How does he apply the power of skillful means? Okay. And so up to this point, I'm going to stop for a while and invite my colleague from the Institute of Humanistic Buddhism at Shan, Venerable Zhitong, to come on stage. Okay. She is Malaysian. She has grown up in KL, attending the children's class, and also spent a few years in University of the West, studying English literature. And after graduating from the Buddhist college, Venerable Zhitong has a vow. She would like to devote her work into the translation of Buddhist texts so that we can bring the wisdom of the Buddha to the West. So she's now working with me in the Department of Center of International Affairs. We translate, we do training, and we have academic exchanges. So this time we're very fortunate to have Venerable Zhitong with us, and I would like to invite her to share this part, this 33 manifestations of the Universal Gate chapter with all of you. Please put your hands together for Venerable Zhitong.
Thank you, Venerable Miao Guang. Auspicious blessings to you all. I'm very happy to be here. And today I would like to share a little bit about the 33 manifestations of Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva. So at this point of the sutra, we've come to the second question that Akshayamati Bodhisattva asked. And he asked, again, world-honored one, how did Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva come to this Saha world? How does he apply the power of skillful means? 世尊观世音菩萨云何有此娑婆世界？云何而为众生说法？方便之力，其是云何？ So Akshayamati Bodhisattva is asking, how does Guanyin Bodhisattva does it? How does he travel around the Sarha world and liberate sentient beings? What is the way that he do that? And so the Buddha gave him 33 answers. But these 33 answers can be boiled down in a nutshell. And in a nutshell, it says that Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva manifest in whatever form that the person needed in order to be liberated, and he will teach the Dharma to that person in that particular manifestations. So the very first manifestation that the Buddha gave was, if a person, if there are living beings in this land who should be liberated by someone in the form of a Buddha, then Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva will manifest in the form of a Buddha and teach the Dharma to them. So if a person, if the way that he needed or she needed to be liberated to start practicing Buddhism is to receive the teaching in someone who is a Buddha, then Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva will appear in the form of a Buddha and teach the Dharma to that person. And the Buddha continues on to give 32 more manifestations. And let's look at it one at a time in brief. So the first is Buddha. The second is Pratyeka Buddha. Now, Pratyeka Buddhas are people who attained awakening without the teaching of a Buddha. They observe the world and they understand the world through the 12 links of dependent origination, and they attain awakening. The third manifestation is Shravaka. Shravakas are people who attained awakening through the teachings of the Buddha, and they understand awakening by listening to the Buddha's explanation of the Four Noble Truths. So this is Shravaka. The first three, the Buddha, Pratyeka Buddha, and the Shravaka, are known as the three noble manifestations. Now the next set is celestial kings and celestial beings. The very first is King Brahma, and the second is Lord Sakra. So for Lord Sakra, even though he's a celestial king, he also practices Buddhism, and the way that he practices with the 10 wholesome actions. And next, we have Isvara and Mahesvara. Now these two are interesting characters because even though they live in the heaven, they are actually evil and wicked heavenly beings. So they are not so-called good heavenly beings, they are wicked and evil. So we might think, why would Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva appear in a wicked form? Who would understand the Dharma in this, a wicked person? But this can also be seen as a great compassion of the Bodhisattva. For some people, they needed to be frightened. They needed to learn what is the worst that could come to them if they don't practice. So this is why Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva appear in a wicked form. Next, we have number 8, Heavenly General, and number 9, Vaisravana. Vaisravana is, like a god of fortune. So people pray to him for fortune. And we might think, how does Vaisravana attain his merit and his fortune? And the way he does this is he practices the 6 perfections. So from now we can see that even celestial beings, they too have their own practices. They practice the 10 wholesome actions, they practice the 6 perfections in order to achieve a higher level of awakening and understanding of the Buddha path. So after a little bit description about celestial beings, we now come down to earth and we have some human leaders. The first human leader is a lesser king. Now why do we call it as a lesser king, Xiao Wang? It's because first we already have celestial kings, Tian Wang, and now we have Xiao Wang to signify kings of human in the human realm. So kings of different countries are considered as lesser kings, and as a king, if they rule the country with benevolence, with compassion, with wisdom, they will also bring their people to liberation. So this is why kings are also important. And next we have elder. By elder, it doesn't really only mean old people. It means people with wealth, people with a good status in a society, people that have a powerful influence in a society. And number 12 is layperson, which is everyone who practice Buddhism. And also minister. By minister, it means people who do something with government, with politics, from village leaders, village chiefs, up to prime minister and presidents. They are all considered as ministers. And as well, next, 14, we have Brahman. Now we know that in India we have the caste system, and Brahman are religious people. So in this case, everyone who is a religious personnel from any religion can be considered as a Brahman, can be categorized as a Brahman. After these human leaders, we now come to the 4 Buddhist practitioners. The first 2 we have Bhikshu and Bhikshuni, which are monastics, male and female monastics. And of course, monastics, they uphold the monastic precepts, and they hope their job is to propagate the Dharma. And 17 and 18, we have Upasaka and Upasika, and lay Buddhist practitioners who uphold the 5 precepts as well as the Bodhisattva precepts. And then from 19 to 22, we have women. Now these women, why is there 4? So we have elder women, lay women, minister women, and Brahman women. So it's the female form of the human leaders. And next, from 23 to 24, we have young boy and young girl. And from 25 to 32, we have the 8 categories of non-human beings. So we have divas, nagas, and if you refer to page 5, we have also yakshas, gandharvas, asuras, garudas, kimnara, and mahoraga. These, they are also celestial beings. Some of them, they might appear in human form, and some of them, they might not appear in human form, but they also practice the Dharma, and we see them all the time in the sutras as being present when they are present in sutra, in Dharma teachings. Last, as the 33rd manifestation of the Bodhisattva, we have Vajrapani deity. Now, Vajrapani in Chinese is 金刚将士, 金刚将军. So by Vajra, it means Vajra is actually in Indian mythology. It's a weapon. It's a weapon that looks like a thunder, like a thunderbolt, and it represents our indestructible vow and our when we aspire to practice the Bodhisattva path, or when we aspire to cultivate Buddhism, our vow should be as powerful and as indestructible as the Vajra, so that no matter what happens to us, we will continue forward on this path that we have chosen. Now, the Buddha has talked about so many, 33 different manifestations that Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva can appear should a person need to be liberated and to be taught in that particular form. And it really makes us think that, hey, everyone around us can be Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva, right? So all the people that you see, your fellow Upasaka and Upasika, the venerables in this temple, everyone, old people, politicians, everyone that connects to us in this life, they are all, and they can all be our bodhisattvas that can guide us and teach us about the practice of Buddhism. Now, when I think about myself, and I think about, have I ever met Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva in my life? And I have a little story to share with you. When I was 17, after graduating from secondary school, I chose to go on a student exchange program. Now, it's a one-year program, and you can choose which country that you wanted to go. So a lot of people chose Japan, Germany, United States. But I thought to myself, if I were to live in a foreign country for 1 year, experiencing a whole new culture, I better choose a place that I have never go before, and a place that is so foreign that I would not know what to do. So I chose Argentina. And so I went to Argentina, and I flew for 30 hours, and I landed in the middle of nowhere. And I always say that I was closer to the South Pole than to the capital city of Argentina. So it was, as you can tell, it was pretty tough. It was my first time so far away from home. And despite, being so nervous, and I have no idea what's going to happen to me, my host family were really lovely. My dad and my host sister, they speak English, so I assimilated pretty quickly, and everything seems to be very nice. But I have a rather difficult host mother. Now, she's a very, very interesting character. She became a mother at a very young age, and so she's only in her 30s. And every day after work, she would have to cook, she would have to clean, and she hated all of it. She hated cooking, she hated cleaning. But she felt that this is her responsibility, this is something that she had to do. There's no choice. So she did it, with complaints, with attitude. And so it was pretty difficult living with her. And I remember every Saturday morning, I would Skype with my family. And a very precious time, only once a week I get to Skype with my family. And she would be there vacuuming. Vroom, vroom, vroom. I was there talking to my parents, and then they're like, is this okay? Is she gonna be mad? We can talk later. And then she goes, vroom, vroom, vroom. I was like, oh, it's gonna be okay. So there's that one thing. And then another, of course, Argentinian food is very different from Malaysian food. And I remember there's one dish that I really, really am afraid of. It's a sort of like a bean cassoulet, a bean soup. And she would cook a whole big pot, and we would have to drink it until we finish the whole pot. And if we don't finish, she will freeze it and cook it again, freeze it and cook it again. So sometimes we drink the bean soup for a whole week. And, I get very afraid when I see that bean soup. And what's really got on my nerve was when we were eating. She loved to talk. She loved to talk to her husband. And so throughout every mealtime, she would be chatting in Spanish, and I don't understand Spanish at that time. It was horrible. And in my mind, I was screaming, please stop talking, please stop talking. I have enough, just stop talking. And so this kind of internal, bad feeling keeps rolling on and on, for almost the whole entire time I was there, the whole year. And at the end of my stay in Argentina, I was very sad to leave, but secretly I was pretty happy to leave my host mother. Everything else was fine, just my host mom. But when I go back, and now a few years has passed, and I think back of my stay in Argentina, who was the person who cooked for me? Who was the person who cleaned my clothes, who cleaned the house, who gave me money to ride the bus to school? Who was the person? It was my host mom. This exchange family program, it's voluntary. She doesn't get paid. And she did it all because her husband hoped that the family can share their experience. And she did it. She cooked and she cleaned despite hating every minute of it. And from that, when I came to that realization, I found that, hey, I need to be more grateful. That my mom, my host mom, has taken care for me for 1 year. Why am I complaining? I should be very, very grateful for all that she's done for me. And on the other side, all the bad feelings that I have from her, I never lashed out on her. I never complained. I took it all in, and it helped me with my patience. So now, if you give me bean soup, I'm okay. So, my host mom is my Bodhisattva, and I'm pretty sure everyone will have a Bodhisattva in your life. And I'm very glad to be here. And I'll hand this mic back to Venerable Miao Guang. Thank you very much.
Thank you to Venerable Zhitong. If you should be saved in the form of Venerable Zhitong, Avalokitesvara will manifest in the form of Venerable Zhitong to share the story of the bean soup, to help you overcome anger and hatred. Okay. Thank you very much for the sharing. Okay. Okay. And also thank you to Venerable Zhitong for a recap of the 33 manifestations that you usually read in the Universal Gate chapter. Okay. But let's kind of go back to these 33 manifestations. You will see that they are basically divided into, let's say, 8 ways with 19 particular characteristics. Okay, so I'm going to quickly just round it up for you to see when she talked about Buddha, Sravaka, and Pratyeka Buddha. You will see if you possess the quality of an enlightened being, Avalokitesvara will appear in the form of an enlightened being, right? And if you appear in the form of a celestial king who still has desires, but you are the guardian of the Dharma, then the guardian of the Dharma will learn the ways of the Buddha in the form of a guardian. And then if you look at human leaders, either as elders, kings, right, and teachers, you will see that what they actually possess is the virtue and merit that allows a personal development to progress spiritually. And if we're looking for ways to continue our practice in the Dharma, right, we see Buddhist practitioners who will manifest by Guanyin. And then as women, right, women particularly are neglected in many forms. But I think coming into today's era, we are starting to sense the power of women in a very strong but gentle way. Okay, let me show you how. Do you all use Google Map? So you won't be strangers to Google Lady, right? So there was a question, why are all GPS navigators used in the sound of women? Right? We once asked that question, why is Google Lady, right? Apple Map also used the sound of a lady, and even Baidu, right? And so I came across an engineer who works in San Francisco, the Silicon Valley, in Google. They actually worked on Google Map, and so he told us the secret. He says they are using women's voice based on human psychology. It is the fact that if you use a man's voice, men are less likely to obey Google Map. Yeah. So if in a man's voice, Google Map says, turn left in 300 meters, right? Yeah, probably the man will go, why should I listen to you? I think I know the right route. I'm going to go straight, right? Yeah. But because when you switch to a woman's voice, right, please turn left in 300 meters, right? And the man will go, okay, that sounds right. I will listen. Yeah. Yeah. So you will see even Google Lady is displaying the power of women's compassion, right? Because the toughest part of your body is not actually your teeth. They will break. They will fall. The toughest part of your body is actually the softest organ, which is your tongue, right? That will go unrotten, even after cremation, according to Kumarajava. Okay? And so that's why we already see the sense of equality between gender as displayed by the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, for us to see that as long as you have the wisdom and the power, right, you can be equally influential. So either as a women Brahmin, right, a women elder, or a women king. So never underestimate who you are. Okay? As proven by Google Lady, the whole world is running on the road because of Google Lady. Okay? And now as for children, okay, we see boys and girls who are innocent, right? And so in many cases, innocence is the most touching power in our life. you will hear the sounds of girls and boys who will actually bring out the most innocent part in you. Okay? I recently heard about the story of one of our Belia members in Malaysia. He has a 5-year-old daughter. And the 5-year-old daughter goes to preschool every day, comes home very happy, having made friends. Okay? But there's only one problem. Every day, the girl will come back to tell her dad that, Daddy, when I grow up, I'm going to marry my classmate, John, because John is very funny, right? And on the next day, Daddy, I'm going to marry Michael when I grow up in my class because Michael is very smart, right? So the dad starts to get worried about all these boys that his girl wants to marry. Okay, so he came up with a way. So one day when he finally got fed up, he turned to his little girl and says, why don't you marry your dad when you grow up so you don't have to worry about meeting all other men, right? But the girl was very smart. The girl turns around and goes, Dad, how can you expect to get married again when you already have a daughter? That's not right, is it? Yeah. So the dad was left in laughter and tears, right? Technically, the girl was right. But you will see in many cases, innocence kind of brings us back to the most natural part of humanity. Okay? We will also be able to read many beautiful stories about the sons and daughters who really come to deliver their parents. Okay? And so sometimes you will also see Avalokitesvara in the form of boy and girl. Okay? And number 7 is something worth mentioning again, celestial beings, right? The Naras, the Gandharas, the Garudas. And we'll see this part, they are actually referred to as non-human beings. 人, 非人等, right? And so why would Avalokitesvara also reach out to non-human beings? We would say this part displays his impartial compassion to say that my universal gateway is open universally. So even to non-human beings, I'll be ready to help you. Okay? And then finally, the last part, 金刚, 直金刚, that Vajrapani deity. And how we can read this is that we refer to the Vajra as your immovable and indestructible Buddha nature. That is within all of us. So remember, when you have lost your direction, when you have forgotten who you are, chanting Avalokitesvara's name helps you uncover that Buddha nature. Okay, so in Chinese, we always hear of the word 金刚, right? 金刚will be the transliteration of Vajra. Okay? But unfortunately, in America, they have really taken it into cultural appropriation to turn King Kong into something strong and indestructible, right? So who is King Kong? You found him as a giant gorilla that appears on top of the Empire State Building. Yeah. But when I grew up, I did not understand the difference between 金刚 and King Kong. Right? And I remember when I was in Australia, when I was in the Yat member, where we had a Buddha's birthday celebration, the processions of offerings, right? The men have to dress up, the women have to dress up to make offerings. And so one day, the MC in Chinese says, 让我们掌声欢迎佛光会的金刚师兄们, right? And the translator didn't know what 金刚 meant, so they remember the cultural appropriation. So her English became, let us put our hands together for the King Kongs of Belia. Yeah, I almost passed away. Yeah. So I just want to kind of, reinstate the term King Kong, right, as a translation of Jing Gang, which is something very beautiful, the indestructible, right, the diamond of our wisdom that actually cuts through distractions. So certainly our gentlemen in Belia and Foguangshan, yes, you are the Vajra. You're the Vajra protectors of the Dharma and Foguangshan. You're certainly not the King Kongs of Foguangshan. Yeah, but so guard that Vajra within you, right? Always remember, no matter how hopeless or helpless you are, turn back to that Buddha nature, right? Always turn and keep finding. And when you're lost, Guanyin Bodhisattva will be your compass, okay? And so coming to this part, we have pretty much covered the 33 manifestations as to see how Guanyin Bodhisattva speaks to us, how Guanyin Bodhisattva acts for us, right? And how Guanyin Bodhisattva thinks of us. And so having heard of this, Akshayamati becomes very happy, right? So if we turn to page number 5, right? Page 5 and paragraph number 5. You will see, he says, Akshayamati, such is the merit that Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva has accomplished, the various forms in which he wanders, and the various lands bringing liberation to living beings. Okay, so what we want to say is, you don't have to become any of the leaders or humans or Brahmin kings, but I think you can possess the qualities. All of us have these 8 different kinds of qualities within us. And if you have it, you can connect to Guanyin Bodhisattva. So remember, by upholding Avalokitesvara's name single-mindedly, I think what you're doing is you're upholding your truest and your best nature, your enlightenment, your willingness to guard the Dharma, right? Your diligence to practice, your virtue and merit from the countless past lives, from believing in the righteous Dharma, and so on. And so we would see, yes, Guanyin Bodhisattva speaks to us, acts on us, and thinks of us in that exact same way. So find that Guanyin within you. If you can find these qualities, you have come face to face with Avalokitesvara. Okay? And so now we're going to go back to that new conversation to think, why is Akshayamati so touched? Right? Touched on the quality that this is how Guanyin comes to you. And so he says, okay, I'm going to make offerings, right? So back to the 6th paragraph on page 5. The Buddha says, if you believe in the merit and the virtue of Avalokitesvara, this is why all of you should single-mindedly make offerings to Avalokitesvara. For it is the great Avalokitesvara, the Bodhisattva Mahesvara, who can bestow fearlessness, 施无畏, in the midst of terror and dire circumstances. This is why in Saha world, everyone calls him the bestower of fearlessness. Okay? And so 2 things in this part. First of all, by offering, right? We are not always just offering material goods. I think any moment you offer your goodwill, you are already making an amazing offering to the people around you that will make changes for the rest of their lives. Okay? And so according to the teachings, we can make 2 types of offerings. The first one is offering of physical, verbal, and mental karma. Right? So instead of offering something material, when you smile, okay, and when you send forth a gesture of acknowledgement, right, and when you send forth a thought of metta or karuna, you are already making an offering to the rest of the world. So this morning when we had the great compassion repentance ceremony, 供养十方法界一切诸佛. And we would say in that moment when you have the faith in the righteous Dharma, as you lift that tray of the flower, 心香一半, right? That flower actually represents your goodwill. It's just that the flower can be smelled, right? So the fragrance becomes a very good presentation of your goodwill. Or the rice, or the sandalwood, that all represent something pure, beautiful, and kind. Okay? So one way we can do this by making an offering to Avalokitesvara is continuing to refine our 3 karmas. As mentioned yesterday, our physical karma, our action, turn our action towards something more beneficial for self and other. Right? Do something good for others. And every day, think of something kind to speak to your family and friends. Right? And if you're brave enough, try it on strangers. That's when you practice patience, when they look at you with very funny expressions. Right? But you're still really practicing patience through doing good deeds and speaking good words. And finally, in everything you do, right, being mindful of Avalokitesvara. I'm going to ask you, what does Avalokitesvara look like to you right now? Does she have a very compassionate face? Do you feel a sense of peace when you visualize your Guanyin? Right? Do you sense of joy? Do you sense joy when you visualize Guanyin? Yeah. So when you do all of that, what you're doing is you are already practicing good deeds. Okay? So always visualize the majestic and the solemn appearances of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Okay? Think less of minions or the avengers who hold weapons. Right? They do aspire, a more fierce nature within you. Yeah, so be very careful with what you think of all the time. Therefore, Guanyin would be a very good practice. Okay, so that's the first type of offering. And the second type of offering is, again, to really cut and penetrate the ultimate truth, right? What is the provisional and what is the ultimate? So by that, you can read into the Buddhist sutras to understand the Buddha's mind, right? And to understand the Bodhisattva's mind. And the moment you connect with the sutras, you are making an offering of principle and the phenomenal, because you're always linking the Dharma into reality, right? What is equality? To treat everyone as if they were your own, right? What is compassion? To feel for others' pain, right? Kindness, to want to give others something good, to bring them out of that pain and suffering. Okay, so out of these two offerings, we will see it's actually demonstrated by Akshayamati in the following action, right? The Akshayamati, what does he do in the Universal Gate? He took off his necklace, right? 他的璎珞, okay? So if you look at the symbol of the necklace in Akshayamati, you will see yin actually represents the crown, right? And lo represents the necklace on the necks. So what happens is, when we talk about yin lo, again, go beyond the literalness of jewels and diamonds. Why? Because by the symbol of the necklace, we are looking at the Bodhisattva's merit and virtue, right? One is their wisdom, which is their intrinsic Dharma body, the Vajra, the immovable, pure nature of the Buddha, which the Bodhisattva will dwell in the name of emptiness. And the second is their merit, acquired from the practice and understanding of the Dharma. That becomes their provisional Dharma body. Right? So you will always talk about Pusa Yinglu, right? So in a way, we are referring to the majesticness in terms of their attainment, in the ultimate and in the provisional again. Okay. So the story goes like this. Akshayamati is so touched upon hearing Avalokitesvara's way of manifestation, right? How he actually tends to us by hearing for the voices and manifest in the way that we need to be saved. So he goes, Bodhisattva, O benevolent one, please accept my offering. I truly admire you. Okay? But Avalokitesvara said, no, don't give me that, because in reality I have no need for jewelries and treasures, right? And so, what would you do when somebody says no to your present? Okay, I promise not to cry when I give away presents. So you feel embarrassed, right? And so Akshayamati didn't know what to do. Therefore, Sakyamuni Buddha turns to Avalokitesvara. He says, for the sake of your compassion in all living beings, please accept it. Right? So refusal to accept the necklace actually is a display of his attainment of ichinyata, right? Technically, the jewelry don't mean anything to me now. And his willingness to accept the jewelry becomes his display of compassion. Although the jewelry means nothing to me, but accepting it means something to the giver. Therefore, compassion. Okay? And so having heard Sakyamuni's exaltation, therefore Avalokitesvara accepts the jewelry. Not for himself. What does he do? He breaks it in half. One becomes offered to the stupa of the many jewels Buddha, right? 多宝佛塔. And the other half to Sakyamuni Buddha. Okay? And so this completes the cycle of generosity, 三轮体空, right? On the highest level, as we can see, for us to see that Avalokitesvara himself acted as the instrument of compassion and an instrument of wisdom. But when he offers half to the stupa of Buddha of many jewels, 多宝佛塔, he's offering one of his existence back to his intrinsic nature, which is the Dharma body, right? And when he offers the other half to Sakyamuni Buddha, the founder of the Saha world, right? And we understand that Sakyamuni Buddha's existence in that sutra becomes his reward body, right? The reward, the merits acquired as a result of his attainment. And so we see in the three cycles, in terms of the essence, which is our Buddha nature, the attribute, what our Buddha nature looks like, right? The appearance of the Buddha, and then the actions and the influence of the Buddha. Then it shows the perfect circle of Dharma body, reward body, and transformation body. And that too shows the fact that Avalokitesvara already is the Buddha, right? He is already there, but he's ready to turn into any kinds of transformation according to the needs of the living beings. And so to close this entire sutra with such a wonderful action, right? The giving, the receiving, and the offering of the jewel, we now come back to this complete set of emptiness and existence, the ultimate and the provisional, right? The spirit and the appearance. And by all of these pairs, we see Avalokitesvara everywhere. Okay? So in close, the Buddha then turns to Akshayamati and says, it is with such freely exercised spiritual powers, 如是自在神通威神力, okay? Freely exercised, 自在, okay? 神通, spiritual powers, that Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva wanders through the Saha world. 游诸世间. And so by that word 游, sometimes we hear of the word 游戏, right? So 游戏 has been adapted in modern language as games, right? We play, we have fun, we game. But 游戏 itself was actually a Buddhist vocabulary provided by the great translators in the past for us to see by 游 and 戏. It means you enjoy passing through every moment of life with wisdom, right? And so how do you enjoy passing even through the pains and the sufferings of life? Avalokitesvara does it. 如是自在威神力. Okay? And so Avalokitesvara's introduction is then closed by Sakyamuni this way. So we complete the entire Q&A. Okay? Very interesting, isn't it? And I hope now you already have a different perspective to how you should see Guanyin. Okay? Anytime you need help, right, don't expect a lady in a white robe to pop up in front of you, especially not during midnight, right? Not in dark places, right? But Guanyin will never actually appear in the form you expected, but in the way that you need it. Okay, so keep an eye out for your Guanyin, and if you don't see anyone around you, keep an eye out for yourself, right? 观自在, 观照自己在不在. Right? To be in Ishvara, are you a master of your own mind? That will be 自在. Okay? And so with the final dedication of merits, we once again reaffirm the merit and the virtue of Guanyin Pusa. Right? But due to limited time, I'm going to omit the next part, going from page 6 all the way to the end of the sutra. But we regard this section as the repetition of the Q&A, the very beautiful verses. Right? 世尊妙相具我今从问彼佛指何因缘名为观世音. So by this, it's like a repetition. So Akshayamati, having heard of the very wonderful stories, turns to the Buddha and say, okay, Buddha, I'm going to have to ask you this question again. Right? Teachers, do you welcome repetitive questions? Right? Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. Right? But this is for the sake of the audience to make sure, okay, let's recap what we have heard. So in the verses, you will look at his question in verse, right? Why is his name Avalokitesvara? Right? That's the first part, the question. And the second part, the Buddha will say, I'm going to tell you that this is his vow and practice. Right? By vow and practice, you will see what do we mean by his deep vow. So give me a few moments. I think this is important. By Guanyin Bodhisattva's vow, we come to the very familiar 4 universal vows, right? 四, 弘, 四, 愿. The 4 universal vows. And what happens is, this is how Guanyin puts it into reality. So to open it up, where it says, I vow to deliver the endless sentient beings, this is his amazing vow to recognize the endless people who need help. Right? His willingness to deliver others, 利他. So you will see, 自利跟利他哪一个先? Okay, which one of the self and others' deliverance come first? In Avalokitesvara's mind, other people's deliverance come first. That's the first vow. And for the second, I vow to eradicate the infinite afflictions. 烦恼无尽誓愿断. Right? It's your vow to end your unwholesomeness. 佛道法门无量誓愿学. I vow to master the boundless teachings of Dharma. Right? This is when you vow to cultivate good. Right? So very interesting start. You begin by wanting to help others. And by wanting to help others, then you are inspired to stop your own unwholesomeness. Right? I have to prepare myself. And having prepared myself, I have to equip myself with the goodness. So you cultivate wholesomeness. So altogether, vow 2 and vow 3 become your vow to help other people. Right? And help yourself, And so 1, 2, 3 completes your process of helping first yourself and others. Right? And finally, vow number 4 on the very right. I vow to attain the Supreme Buddhahood. 佛道无上誓愿成. Right? It's a completion of 自利 and 利他. Completion of deliverance for both yourself and others. Okay? So you might discover the beautiful sequence that is presented by the Bodhisattvas to show you how they walk the walk. Right? They didn't just go pop and they become Bodhisattvas. They also endured countless sufferings in order to get where they are. And once they get to the other shore, believe it or not, their first vow is that I'm going to turn about and bring the rest along to the other shore. Okay? And so that's why the Buddha's answer of the Bodhisattva's vow becomes this important. Okay? And so as you keep going, you will see a repetition, right, of the story, keeping in mind Avalokitesvara's powers, the verses of the dangers, right? The dragon, the fire, the poisons, and so on, right? And what's the purpose of going through all these dangers? Because Avalokitesvara wants to liberate you from suffering. And then to close, it goes back to praising Avalokitesvara's actions, the 3 karmas, and teaching of fearlessness, and then coming down to the very final word, which is to make sure that no longer should you have doubt in Avalokitesvara. Have full faith, and that's how you reaffirm your faith in Guanyin Pusa. Okay. So finally, we close with the dedication of merits, which is in the final section of a sutra. We begin with the introduction, right? 序分. And the body of the sutra, 正中分. We always end the sutra with 流通分, which is the circulation. And in circulation, this is what it says. Now, the third character in Universal Gate appears. 持地菩萨. Okay. Now, universal, a ground-holding Bodhisattva stands up and says, World-honored one, if there are living beings who hear this chapter on Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva, about his freedom of action, his revelation of the Universal Gate, and his supernatural powers, it should be known that their merits are not few. Okay. So question, who is ground-holding Bodhisattva? 持地菩萨是谁啊？路人甲。So mind you, every character in the sutra appears for a reason, right? And so you might get a hint of who ground-holding Bodhisattva is by the word 地。猜猜看，持地菩萨是谁？地藏菩萨, right? Ksitigarbha. Okay, so why do we do this? You will see when we began with infinite intention, 无尽意, right? You see the first aspect of Guanyin Bodhisattva, that is his wisdom, right? To skillfully deliver all living beings. And then throughout the story, we talk about the manifestations, reaching out to any being, anytime, anywhere. That represents the second aspect of Guanyin. That is compassion. Okay? And finally, when you want to achieve a goal, you can't just have vow, you can't just have wisdom and compassion. You need action. So that's why in closing, right, everything we have talked about becomes reaffirmed by Ksitigarbha and says, I have the courage to make all of this happen. So 地藏菩萨 will represent the third aspect of Guanyin, which is courage. So wisdom, compassion, courage. Each is being played by the 3 characters in the Universal Gate chapter for us to see, yes, believe in it, practice it, and then the merits will never go in vain. Okay, so by this, we close the Universal Gate chapter. Okay, so in close, I want to ask you these 3 questions. Okay, first of all, who is Guanyin? I would like you to lift your finger and point to your Guanyin. Right? You point to others. Remember the other 4 fingers? You're actually pointing at yourself, right? Yes, you're right. You are the Guanyin. Remember, most of your calamities come from the within, right? And your Guanyin can help you put an end to the suffering. Okay, so don't be afraid. Show your courage to be your own Guanyin. And second question, who are the sentient beings in the sutra? Again, pick up your finger and point, right? The delusions and the defilement that comes from the within, right? So it's all in there. You can solve your own problems if you believe in it. And thirdly, how does Guanyin deliver these sentient beings? Right? The universal gate of turning. Remember, Famen is a portal. Have faith in the fact that when you pass through that Famen, that gate, you can change. So what do you change? You turn anger into compassion. Okay? You turn ignorance into wisdom, right? And then you turn your fear into courage. That's how you pass through the Universal Gateway chapter. Okay? I'm sorry for going over time, but I really hope to cover the entire Universal Gate chapter. And I hope that after 2 years, I have come back to offer something solid to you, and may you enjoy and have a deeper faith in Guanyin Bodhisattva from now on. Thank you very much. Thank you for being my Guanyin.
Please rise. Join palms. Bow. 谢谢师父. Once again, a round of applause to Venerable Miao Guang as she takes her leave.